Blue Jays have a golden opportunity. And following what has been a very solid offseason thus far for Ross Atkins, he is still missing one key piece. And a brand new report has dropped, revealing an opportunity that can change everything for the Toronto Blue Jays. We're going to break down this report and discuss what it means going forward, as well as discuss a couple other updates. Before we get into that, folks, quick reminder, if you're part of that percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, about 71% of you who are watching right now haven't hit that subscribe button. Make sure to do so. We're very close to 16,000 subscribers. Thank you guys very much for your continued support. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to go over today. We know it's in an interesting part now. This is the week where players and catchers report to spring training. The Super Bowl is over. Everybody is shifting into baseball season, which is very exciting. And Ross Atkins has had a solid offseason thus far. However, he still needs at least one more piece. And a very interesting opportunity has rose. I'm going to break it all down. So you can see this here. Now let's think back to January of last year. The Jays were really after free agent Xander Bogaerts. So this was January of 2023. It's almost 2 years ago now. And there's very important context in this. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But this report just dropped yesterday, I believe, or 2 days ago. Report: Padres open to trading both Bogaerts and Jake Cronenworth. Two of the San Diego Padres' most expensive players are apparently available. The Padres are open to moving both Xander Bogaerts and Jake Cronenworth. San Diego wants to move off a significant portion of the money owed to both players. However, that might be difficult because Bogaerts is owed over $225 million over the next 9 seasons. So there's a bunch of things to go over here. Now, obviously, this is a tidbit from the actual article, so I'll show you guys exactly what the quote was. The Padres are also said to be open to moving Xander Bogaerts or Cronenworth, and a significant portion of the money they are owed. The substantial hurdles there involve finding a trade partner willing to take on that money, that partner having adequate big league talent to offer in return, and which prospect the Padres would have to part with to sweeten the deal. Keep in mind, which prospects the Padres would have to part with. So there's a bunch of different things here. One, Xander Bogaerts is an extremely interesting player, and the Jays are in a situation where in a time like this where you're one piece away. Now, Xander Bogaerts has not been good lately. We'll show you his stats here in a minute. But at a time when you're one piece away from at least being, having a solid offseason and being a playoff contender. I'm not saying they're one piece away from being a World Series contender, but we know, Max Scherzer came out and said the Jays are trying to go all in, all these different things. When these opportunities come up to where a team with a very talented player at the very least is willing to trade in order to save some money and get off of some of that contract, that's when things get very interesting. And he's talking about the Padres parting with, prospects in a deal. The Jays, of course, would have to give up a little bit of prospects as well here. But this is extremely interesting. You read the bottom paragraph, the second last one. Complicated matter is the fact that both players own some level of no trade protection. Bogaerts holds a full no trade clause. He's 32. And he hit just 30 homers since joining the Padres. He was moved off second base, amidst a defensive decline here. So let's get into his stats a little bit. Now, where he would play with the Jays, you'd have to figure it out. Whether that be second base, you move someone to third, whether you try him at third base. Since joining the Padres, he hasn't been great. Now, in 2023, the season before last, he was very solid. Of course, when he was a free agent, he put up a 4.4 WAR, a 117 OPS plus. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, the Jays were very on Xander Bogaerts in 2023 following the when he was a free agent, right? Last season, he hit just 264, put up a 92 OPS, and his power hasn't been there since really the 2019 season with the Boston Red Sox when he was an MVP finalist, right? So he is not the player that he once was. There's no doubting that. But to add a veteran guy who can hit for some average, hit for a tiny bit of power, and in the past was extremely good defensively, albeit wasn't as good lately. He obviously was a shortstop for most of his career. You move him, you're obviously not going to put him at second base because you have Andres Gimenez there. If you can find a way to get him to third base, just add talent to this group. That's kind of what I want at this point. I'm curious to see what you guys want Xander Bogaerts. Now, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, the Jays wouldn't be giving up very many prospects in this scenario. And you can see this here. If the Padres are willing to eat half of Bogaerts' deal, color me intrigued. If they eat half his deal, that's $12.5 million AAV for a guy who was an MVP finalist at, times. He's not quite as good now, but you could easily see a bounce back. He had above a 4 WAR for the majority of his career, albeit last season was definitely a down year for him. This would be a perfect time to buy low on a guy where, as the Blue Jays organization, you can inherit some of that salary. Now, maybe you give up a guy like, a couple of, lower tier prospects. Maybe if, the Padres don't want to take any salary, then they'd give up prospects. But I mean, there's a world where maybe the Jays go ahead and they trade a guy like, I'm not saying necessarily, maybe a Relvis Martinez or trade something like that. I don't think a Relvis Martinez would be a good deal for the Jays, but it's something that's being thrown around there. And as you look at some of their prospects, will the Jays give up their second best prospect for a guy like Xander Bogaerts? I highly, highly doubt it. Maybe they give up someone in the top 10 prospect list in order to acquire Xander Bogaerts if the Padres, of course, aren't willing to eat salary. If they're willing to eat salary, then things start to get very, very interesting. You can see this here, in the report, what prospects the Padres would have to part with, because if they aren't eating any salary, then they're going to have to include prospects rather than the Jays including prospects. And I think this is a time where Rogers should flex their, financial muscle here and go after a guy where if you can get a talented player and even a prospect back, but in general, just a talented player, and all it costs you is money, then that is a very interesting opportunity that you should absolutely be interested in going for. You see this here, San Diego's $204 million payroll ranks in 9th in the majors. However, the team's offseason has been dominated by an ownership dispute that seems to have hampered its ability to spend. And they were one of the finalists on Roki, but he, spurned to the Padres. Would have been perfect for them because obviously they're not spending money at this point. I mean, if they're having a fire sale, you go out and you get this guy, right? You go out, and I'm not saying it's a perfect fit. I don't even think he's a fantastic player at this point of his career. I think he has the ceiling to be a solid player. But if you're able to get a guy that you can slide into your lineup every single day, he's not super old. He's going to be turning 32. And he's under contract, albeit a pretty hefty contract, over $200 million. But the way that contracts are going with everything going up these days, like that contract is not as crazy as some fans may think. And maybe if they think that Bichette is going to leave after this season, they have him there as a temporary replacement as they start to prepare Arjun Namala to come up. And maybe they have Bogaerts the next handful of seasons if Bichette leaves. So for this season, you run Bogaerts at third base or wherever you want to, factor him into the lineup. And then, of course, so you have Bogaerts at third base for this season, and then, of course, you have Arjun Amala in the future, and then once Bichette leaves after this season, you slide Xander Bogaerts over. Like, there's a lot of reasons to make this trade, and the most important one is because you wouldn't really have to give up prospects in a deal like this. You wouldn't have to, and it is a perfect opportunity for the Toronto Blue Jays to be able to get assets back, and let's keep in mind, their prospect pool is very thin. I don't think they're going to want to deal, I don't think they're going to want to trade a guy like a Relvis, really any of their top prospects necessarily, maybe some like mid-20s, mid-teens prospect. But other than that, you're not going to want to give up a prospect of, top 10 at all, maybe 15, 16s, because obviously you don't know what you're going to get from Xander Bogaerts. So let me know down below what your thoughts are. Things are getting interesting. We know the Jays had interest in him in the past. They are familiar with Scott Boras, Xander Bogaerts' agent, and the Padres want someone who's willing to eat at least some of the money. And if they want to eat some of it, then and still trade with a prospect, go for it. If they're asking another team to take all of their contract and they'll attach a prospect, I mean, worst case, you have a bit of a rough contract, but you're able to get a prospect back, continue to improve that farm system, and get a very talented player without having to go through free agency where they strike out a fair bit, and of course, without having to give a top prospect. And that's one of the biggest things. I think they want to hug onto the prospects for a while and not give many of them up. But that'll wrap it up. Let me know down below what your thoughts are. A ton of interesting things are coming out. We're going to keep you up to date with all the latest Jays news. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers.